So what I want to do is I want to show you something that I actually worked on yesterday, totally unbeknownst to me what you were working on. It's actually very similar to what you did. The only difference is instead of using Ansible, I used our tools Gateway.
Okay.
So I know you deployed Gateway. I know you've had access to it. So you've seen it a little bit, but let me show you something I did.
I'm really excited to see this.
All right, so you've probably logged into Gateway, you've done all this other stuff. Log in. So I wrote this yesterday because one of the customers I'm actually working with, they have a very similar problem to what you'd solved with your networking, except they wanted to know about information about their resource records, specifically their C and A name records, because they want to know what is externally facing, what is pointing to, and who actually owns these things. So I whipped this thing up real quick, and it's very. I understand the buttons are very simple, but the magic that happens behind it is nice because all this information, like like we've talked about before, is available 100% in BlueCat. So everything you're going to see here is there's nothing fancy going on. I'm not pulling it from other resources. We can if we need to, but all this is information is available. The difference is it's not straightforward to just as easily get to like looking at a CSV sheet, and it's kind of difficult to just tell anybody to go, yeah, go into log into BlueCat and find what you're looking for, because as you know from logging into Address Manager, it's logging into like a power user's tool. It's essentially like handing my mom a CLI and say, yeah, navigate to your My Documents and open your document. My mom's not going to know what the heck to do. So I built this little tool to pull this data out. I call it dump data, coincidentally enough. And it does basically exactly what you did with networks, except for these records. So when I press that button, it goes into BlueCat. It iterates all the zones, all the views, all the different records, and it pulls out the information. Now all we did is we took the record ID. So this is the actual ID in BlueCat. So if you go to BlueCat, inside of your address manager is your actual ID, the fully qualified record name. So in this case, we're dealing with an A record, what it's actually linked to, and then all the various properties associated with it. So it's a very simplistic dump, but this is what they were looking for, is something very simplistic of, I just need a list of records, I need it quick, and I need it now.
Very cool.
Eventually, what this is going to evolve into is a second step process where we did it manually because they're like, we need it yesterday type deal,
Right.
because they're doing an audit. Well, we're going to take this and we're going to develop this into a REST endpoint, so that way their automated tools can call it on a schedule, suck this information in, and then push it into their own third-party system, which maintains all of the information about the describing information about I think their records, I believe is what it is.
That was very cool. And again, to be clear, that magic button that you showed is working with APIs under the hood, right?
Yes, I can actually show it to you if you're interested. I actually happen to have it open. So this, and I recognize coming from me, this is somebody who does this as a daily basis. I've been working for BlueCat for 3 years, so I've been doing this a while. This probably took me about an hour to an hour and a half to sit through and actually create. But what I didn't do is I didn't create everything from scratch. I took a lot of this information from stuff we built before or other things I found on GitHub and stuff like that, and I mashed this together to create what is necessary. Yes, I have the knowledge of the APIs and stuff like that, so I know, okay, I need to call this API to
Right.
get this information and how to do it. But I was able to leverage the tools that we have to better create these things. This is Python, so if you're not comfortable with Python, it's a little bit different. But what we tried to do here is with Gateway, really empower our users not only with documentation, but also with wrapped calls, which you'll see in a second, as well as the ability to create, like, I mentioned the community we had before.
Hmm.
When you're creating workflows, we give you basics. There's stuff there that you can find. When you go to create a workflow, you don't have to create all this stuff here. A lot of it's auto-created for you right from the actual UI, which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
Basically, this is the basic rendering. So the button, the form template, it's pretty straightforward. You literally load the template, render the template, it dumps it out to the user. This is where the button shows up to the user.
Right.
And then when they click that button, we come
It
down here and
runs. Right.
yep, it runs this form. It goes through. First thing we do, obviously, is get the configuration, which if you're not familiar with the configuration, is just the list of the bucket of information that's within Address Manager. We get our views, and then we start the process of actually extracting all these records. So the code here is pretty straightforward because it doesn't need to be, it's not complicated.
Right.
Once we get into the get records, that's where we start getting into the more interesting stuff of, all right, I'm going to grab the record, the actual record info, which is all this, which is this piece here.
Right.
And this is just iterating over the types of records that I want. In this case, I want host record and alias record, and just getting all this information.
That's really neat. And to anybody looking on here, we had mentioned, that bridge to programming into the programming world from a network or DNS engineer or something.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at this, even my Ansible stuff, it's basic for loops and if statements. That's it. Like my code is not, I'm not doing arrays or pointers. It's not C++. It's, for loops and if statements more or less.
Mm-hmm. And one interesting thing that I would like to call out here is, to contrast this to the Ansible playbook that you did. Not that it's wrong or it's bad. The difference that a tool like Gateway can help provide is the ability to wrap and make things a little more readable.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is if we recall back to the playbook that we looked at before, something like the search for records, we remember was a big string. There's a bunch of stuff that we had to do to it. We had to process that data that came back. Because of the framework that Gateway provides, it does a lot of that under the covers for you. So for example, to get all the records of a particular type for this zone, that's all I have to do. So it's a lot more straightforward from a tooling perspective to be able to write a workflow in this way, because it's easier to understand. Not that APIs are difficult, but having to know all those syntax and stuff like that, this removes a lot of that for you.
Yeah,
And
it's like an API for the APIs.
Exactly.
Right.
Instead of dealing with, okay, I need to search for, this particular type. How do I do that? It's all right. I know that I have a configuration. I need to get the views. Configuration.get views. I know I have the zone. I need to get all the records from a zone. They're children of that zone, so I'm going to pull it off of that. And then on top of that, it provides a lot of additional context type methods. So on a record, get the full name, because normally the name of a record or a zone or whatever is just that one piece.
Right.
With something like this, you don't have to traverse up the line to figure out what you're looking for.
Right.
Get full name, and it's there and available for you.
Well, very cool. Very cool.
So
I'm glad yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that we're trying to do. And this is, I went back to community and we're trying to empower our users. Like, this is the sort of tool that we're releasing to, empower our users to do more stuff like this, so they can do things like you're doing.
Right.
And one of the great things about this is, and I realize I'm sounding very salesy right now, but this is what I do. Like, I love this sort of stuff, because your Ansible playbook is fantastic. It's in one place. It can work the same way all the time. From a BlueCat perspective, something like Gateway can take that business logic of like managing how the records work and stuff like that. It centralize it in one place, and instead of being just Ansible or just whatever other tool you're using, it can be accessible anywhere via any tool consistently. So now you have consistency across the board in your architecture, which is really important, as I'm sure everybody figures out, because transitions happen, new people come on board, and if it's the same way at the same time, the same action executed the same way every single time, it's really easy. And not
Yeah.
only that, you can expose that data in new ways for new audiences. Let's say they don't care about a CSV format. Let's say you want to actually write a report. You can write something just like we did, just like what you did with the Ansible playbook, to spit out a report. So I know I sound maybe a little
it's
preachy,
exciting.
but
I get the same way. I when you're passionate about what you do and you see the value to customers, in your case, in my case, I see the value as a potential customer, as a consumer. Yeah, it's hard not to get excited and to try to share that passion with people, right? So I appreciate the look under the hood there.
yeah,
And again, it's the flexibility, right? Some people may just want to use the GUI, and you've invested in a very great ecosystem in the GUI. Some people may want to automate with Ansible. Some people may want to write their own Python. Some people may want to move to a full workflow in the gateway. So, yeah, I'm really impressed, and I'm glad Dana set this up, and I spent. Like I said, I only put a few hours in this. I'm on vacation right now. I'm personal time off, and I did this on my free time. So that's the investment it took. It's not like I hammered away at this all night long and lost a lot of sleep. It was maybe an hour of development time total.
And again, this goes back to it's not as difficult as it looks.
No,
That may look really complicated, but once
right.
you sit down and breaking it down, it's actually pretty logical. So it's not as bad as it looks, and that's what I try to get across whenever I talk to customers. They're like, I don't know about this automation or integration thing. It's just Greek to me. I'm like, just spend a few minutes looking at it. Like, take some time because not only is it going to make your life easier, it's going to impress the people above you because you're going to be so much faster at things. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
And let's face it, at a certain level, it's required in this day and age. We
Yeah.
have to be moving so quick on an everyday basis that I don't think we can really afford not to do things like that.
No,
You know?
and I think that we're also held to a bit of a higher standard, and we're paid very well to work
Hmm.
on valuable problems. They're not paying me to log in and set up an interface with the right VLAN. I mean, that stuff has to be automated, right? You want
Yep.
to work on higher value tasks, moving up the stack, really investing your time in solving problems,
Hmm.
not spending your time on the hamster wheel of Patch Tuesday every month. I have to, right? Like
Yep.
we need to elevate ourselves in our profession, I think, and that's what these tools are letting us do.
And that's an excellent point because that's another thing that I run into is like I don't want to the automation has this connotation of I'm going to lose my job.
Right.
And it's because of factories of old where sure, a robot might actually replace you, but all these processes and things like that, we're not trying to replace you. We're trying to get that everyday garbage that you're doing out of your life so you can concentrate, just like you said, on the things that are important, whether that be the next generation of your infrastructure or deploying the good stuff or moving to cloud or whatever it might be. It's really about making sure you're actually providing value and doing your job as opposed to just be the guy who presses the button to make sure the network keeps
Right.
going.
Right.
So I have one last question and we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
What can companies like BlueCat do to help further empower their users from your perspective?
I think that's another great question. I think that what you're doing is on the right track. Like there's not many vendors that have invited me to a Slack channel, have actually sought out my feedback. But it goes more than that. The good GitHub repository with solid examples of Python or Ansible or Jinja or JSON or whatever it is,
Hmm.
opening up the doors to documentation and how to use the APIs. Um, Training and investment and just that public engagement to show you're not just another appliance from another company and another vendor in a sea of vendors. um, you're engaging with the community, and your existing customers provide feedback, which then you integrate in your next generation of your product, which continues that iterative cycle. Customers provide feedback, they get better value, they provide more feedback, they get even more value, right? So
Hmm.
that's what I like to see from vendors myself.